My grandson Caleb said those 3 words right in front of everyone.
It was the 4th of July, the kind of sweltering heat only Phoenix, Arizona, can deliver, and the air conditioning was humming like a jet engine. We were all crammed around the long, heavy oak table I built back in '98. There were aunts, cousins, neighbors, the whole crowd.
The kid's voice didn't even shake.
It was sharp, solid, delivered like a punch straight to the gut. And trust me, it landed. The room didn't go quiet, which was the worst part. Folks just kept going with that fake, loud laughter, the awkward clink of ice in their glasses, and every single set of eyes carefully avoiding mine. I suddenly felt like I'd been edited right out of the room.
I didn't yell. I didn't beg.
I just sat there, the sound of those words thundering in my chest way louder than any small talk. That was the exact moment I got it. A real slap in the face doesn't always come with a big storm. Sometimes, it's just one perfect sentence, delivered by the same boy I used to let ride around on my shoulders. But here's the thing that nobody chewing on prime rib in that dining room knew. Every single brick of this ranch-style home, every dollar spent on that massive spread, every smug little smile they were wearing, it all started with me. And before the night was done, I was going to make sure they remembered that fact in a way they'd never, ever forget. I looked across the table at my son, Jason. He was busy slicing into the big roast, grinning like a fool as if nothing at all had just happened. Tiffany, his wife, leaned over to whisper some little nothing in his ear. She let out a laugh, too loud, too long, the kind of noise that was clearly meant to tell the whole neighborhood how blissfully happy she was.
I knew that laugh. It wasn't happiness.
It was victory.
And right then, the lights went on for me.
This wasn't just some sloppy remark from an 18-year-old kid. No, this was a setup. I was watching them systematically scrub me out of my own life. I reached for my iced tea. My hands were rock steady, holding the volcano inside. The glass shook a tiny bit, but it wasn't fear, it was the sheer force of keeping it all bottled up, the weight of a lifetime of memories colliding with this miserable evening.
Caleb was sitting up straight, shoulders squared, looking like a man.
He was old enough now to know the exact damage words could do, old enough to understand what a true betrayal was. His eyes flashed away from mine quickly, but I caught that little flicker of arrogant defiance. A neighbor across the way, trying to be helpful, piped up.
"Great night, isn't it, Frank?"
"What a magnificent property, a wonderful family." His words felt like acid being poured on a wound. I just nodded, managed some sort of smile, but all I could think was, yeah, great house.
But who broke his back to build it?
The dinner dragged on, clattering silverware, a low, constant drone of meaningless chatter. But to me, all the noise was just a blur, drowned out by the repeating echo of Caleb's words, "You're not family." After a while, I made my excuse, mumbling something about needing to step outside for some air.
No one tried to stop me. No one followed. That right there was the answer I didn't want, but damn, did I need it.
They were perfectly fine without me. The hallway was almost dark, lined with picture frames.
My pictures, once. Now they told a story I wasn't allowed to be in. Jason and Tiffany at some fancy corporate event. Caleb in his football gear, holding up a championship trophy.
Chloe, my granddaughter, caught mid-laugh on a bright afternoon.
But me? My face was gone.
Pictures I had picked out, framed myself, had been pulled down and replaced. I slowed my pace, studying the wall, realizing the erasure had started long before Caleb ever spoke a single word.
I stopped by the living room doorway.
The sound from the table was muffled but clear.
Tiffany's voice, sharp and high-pitched, cut through the noise. "Well, things are just so much better now. We can host events properly, finally."
A wave of laughter followed, and then Jason's low, proud agreement.
"Better now.
Host properly." They made it sound like my mere existence had been the anchor holding them back. I sank into the leather armchair by the window, the one I bought over 25 years ago.
My fingers traced the worn-out leather.
Every single crease was familiar. Each one a tiny record of nights I'd spent right here, holding Jason when he was small, reading him stories until he passed out. And now his own son, the boy who used to beg me to tell him those same tales, had called me a stranger. This whole house was filled with ghosts, not just from tonight, but from entire decades.
Tiffany could repaint and hang all the new photos she wanted, but the walls knew. The floors remembered. And I damn sure remembered. "Grandpa?" A soft voice pulled me back.
Chloe was standing in the doorway, her hands clasped tight in front of her. She was 15, with kind eyes that still actually saw me. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry about what Caleb said." I forced a smile, even though it felt like tearing a muscle.
"It's not your fault, kiddo."
Her forehead furrowed.
"But it wasn't true. You are family. You're everything."
She glanced back toward the dining room, nervous.
"They don't get it, but I do."
Those words nearly broke me worse than Caleb's had, because they were pure, and sincerity was a currency that had been devalued to nothing in this house.
I leaned forward, dropping my voice low. "Chloe, listen to me. Sometimes people forget where they came from.
They forget who helped them stand on their own 2 feet. But just because they forget, it doesn't change what's true." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I hate how they treat you." "Hate is a heavy thing to carry," I said gently.
"Let me hold on to that one. You just remember what you know."
She quickly wiped her eyes, terrified of getting caught showing me any loyalty. Then she slipped back toward the noise of the dining room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I stayed in that chair long after the dishes were cleared and the laughter finally died out. The house went quiet, but my mind was screaming. I ran Caleb's words over and over, not to beat myself up, but to carve them into my memory, to make sure I never forgot the lesson.
The people you give everything to will still throw you away. But they were wrong. And the time was coming when they'd be reminded of it. Not with a fight, not with a yelling match, but with the cold, hard truth. With something stronger than all their noise. That night, when I finally got up and headed for my room, I walked past the oak table again. It was empty, just crumbs and half-empty glasses left on the surface. I laid my hand flat on the wood, feeling the grain. I built that table with my own 2 hands. Every meal, every big celebration, every argument, every truce, it had all happened right here. Tonight, it had been the stage for my humiliation. But tomorrow, or the day after, it would host something else entirely. In the dead silence, I whispered to the wood itself. "Not yet. But soon." The hallway lights blinked off, and I realized Tiffany had killed most of the power, leaving me in the near dark. She hadn't bothered to check if I was settled. Never asked if I needed anything. Why would she? As far as she was concerned, I was already gone. I took the stairs slowly, not because my legs were failing, but because every step was a reminder that this was still my home. The banister was smooth under my palm, polished by my touch for decades. The little squeak on the second stair, the worn dip in the fourth one. These flaws were mine. They were part of my life. As I reached the landing, I heard Jason's voice downstairs, faint, but clear enough to catch the words. "Frank won't be here much longer. Trust me." Tiffany's cold, confident laughter followed. I stood in the darkness, my heart now completely steady. They thought I didn't hear them. They thought I was finished. But they were so completely wrong. Because what they, and no one else, knew was that I had already started the prep work. Quietly. Patiently. With paperwork, not shouting. And when that moment arrived, they wouldn't just be reminded that I was family. They'd remember I was the absolute foundation. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of aches, not because of age, but because of memory. Memory is a stubborn animal. It doesn't listen when you try to quiet it. It creeps into the silence and runs loops through your head. As I lay there, I kept coming back to the first time I carried Jason into this house. It wasn't fancy then. The walls were raw plaster, and the floors still smelled like fresh-cut pine. Tiffany wasn't even in the picture. It was just me, a much younger man, holding my boy and promising him this place in Phoenix would always be his safe place, his anchor. And for years, I kept that promise.
But promises, I've learned, get real messy when people decide to forget how they started.
Morning broke, gray and damp against the bright Arizona sun.
I was up early, as always, long before the rest of them stirred. I headed for the kitchen, the one I designed specifically to catch the sunrise through its huge window. The coffee machine started its low, comforting hum, a sound that was a million times better than Tiffany's shrill voice. I sat at the island, staring at the light spreading across the backyard. I thought about the years. Jason used to sit across from me, a little boy with scraped knees, asking me a million questions.
Why does the sky change color? How does a tree become a table? Why do some men break their word and others stick to it? I answered every single thing I could.
And when I didn't know, I told him the truth. We figure it out as we go, son.
And yet, here we were.
He had stopped asking, and he had stopped listening.
Up already? A voice startled me.
Tiffany stood in the doorway, silk robe cinched tight, her hair perfectly done even though the sun was barely up.
She didn't look at me when she spoke. She never did.
She walked right to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of fresh juice, and closed the door with a firm snap.
Yes, I answered simply.
She poured a glass for herself. You know, Frank, maybe it's time you seriously considered moving somewhere a little smaller. Something more manageable, a place better suited to your stage of life. Her words were polite to the point of being venomous, and her eyes never softened. This place is perfectly manageable, I replied, my voice steady. She took a sip of her juice, that thin, rehearsed smile spreading across her face.
For now, perhaps. But things change.
Families grow up, houses need to evolve, and sometimes, old spaces need to find new purposes. I met her gaze directly.
This house already has a purpose. It always has.
Her smile widened, cold and confident.
Well, we'll see.
She left the glass on the counter, half empty, and walked out. The coffee maker sputtered out its last drop. I sat there, letting her words hang in the air like smoke.
Moving out. Smaller place. Stage of life.
They were already writing me out of the script. I thought of Caleb again, his sharp tone at the table.
You're not family.
Maybe he hadn't come up with those words himself. Maybe they were spoon-fed to him, the way a parent hides medicine in a favorite snack. The thought made my chest heavy, but it also sharpened a dangerous edge inside me.
This wasn't just a kid's mistake. It was a calculated decision by the family.
Later that morning, I wandered out back to the shed. It smelled like oil and old wood, just as it had for 30 years. My hands ran over the tools lined up on the wall, hammers, saws, wrenches, all mine. Bought with my wages, used to build not just furniture, but a life. I picked up a small wooden box from the shelf. Inside were photographs, Jason on his first day of school, him and Tiffany at their wedding, Caleb and Chloe as toddlers. And tucked beneath them all, one picture of me holding Jason in front of this very house when the roof was finished back in 1999. We both looked proud. I traced my finger along the edge of that photo, wondering at what point pride had turned into greedy possession.
Grandpa?
Chloe's voice called from the yard. She poked her head into the shed, her eyes worried.
Are you okay? I set the box down. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just doing some remembering.
She stepped closer, her sneakers crunching on the gravel floor. I heard Mom talking.
She said you might move.
I smiled gently, though it felt like a lie.
People talk a lot. Doesn't make it the gospel truth.
Her eyes glistened.
But what if they try to make it true?
For a moment, I had a sudden, overwhelming urge to tell her everything, that her mother and father were already pushing me out, that Caleb's words were a planned attack.
But she was still a kid, even with all her wisdom. I couldn't break that innocence.
I stood up straight, my back to the wall of tools. I looked her dead in the eye, that little spark of resolve hardening within me. Sweetheart, I said, my voice dropping to a low, powerful rumble, the one I used to use when I closed a deal.
There's something you need to understand right now. People can talk, and they can plan, and they can try to erase things. They can even try to take something from you. But you listen to me, Chloe.
I took a deliberate step toward her, forcing her to hold my gaze.
This house is not just a building.
This house is my blood, my sweat, and my signature. I am the man who holds the deed. I am the man who still pays the taxes. Tiffany and Jason are living a life I built, but the foundations, the steel, and the security of this family, that's my name on the bottom of the page. And if they think for 1 second that they can simply push me out of my own life, if they think they can use my own grandson to humiliate me and get away with it, they are about to learn the single biggest, most expensive mistake of their lives. I rested a heavy hand on her shoulder.
They want to remind me I'm an outsider? Fine. I'll remind them that I'm the landlord.
And right now, Chloe, they need to be looking at the expiration date on their lease. I let the silence sit heavy between us, a silence thicker than the phoenix heat. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with understanding. I'm not leaving, I stated, the finality of it absolute. I'm the only one who decides when and where I go. And before I'm done, they're going to wish they never opened their mouths at that oak table. I picked up a large file folder from a nearby bench, its manila cover worn smooth.
I didn't open it. I just tapped the corner lightly.
You tell me, Chloe, I said, leaning in.
A good story needs a good twist, right? A surprise ending where the bad guys lose everything they thought they had? Well, I've got the final chapter of this story right here. The final hand.
I couldn't put that kind of pressure on her young shoulders.
Chloe, I said instead, don't you worry a bit. This old house has a memory way longer than people think. It knows exactly who belongs here.
She tilted her head to the side.
You mean, like it knows you? I let out a low chuckle. That's the exact idea.
A small flicker of hope crossed her face, and she smiled, then turned and scampered back toward the main building. Once she was gone, I leaned against the heavy workbench. The shed was quiet now, but my brain was racing like a stock car. I ran through the whole roster: Tiffany's snide remarks, Jason's pathetic silence, Caleb's flat-out betrayal, and Chloe's pure innocence. Then, just like a loose thread pulling an entire design out of a carpet, an old memory popped up, one I hadn't touched in 3 decades.
The deed. The paperwork.
When I first put this place up in 1997, I made absolutely sure of one thing: it was never going to end up in the wrong hands. I had talked to a lawyer back then, a move that felt a little over the top at the time, but now seemed like pure foresight. There were conditions, specific hidden clauses, details that even Jason had probably long forgotten.
Paper, not noise. That was the ticket.
Not shouting across a dinner table, not fighting in the kitchen.
Just paper. Quiet. Unforgiving. I left the shed with a calm I hadn't experienced in weeks.
My steps were slow, heavy, but everyone was intentional as I crossed the yard back toward the building that had tried to wipe me out. That evening, when the family gathered in the living room again, I took my usual armchair.
The flat-screen TV was blaring some sitcom Tiffany enjoyed.
Jason was beside her, his arm lazily draped over the sofa back.
Caleb was glued to his phone, and Chloe was reading quietly in the corner. Not a soul spoke to me. Nobody asked about my day.
And for the first time, I didn't care, because I knew the entire game had changed.
Good night, everyone, I said finally, getting up to head upstairs.
Night, Jason replied, distracted, not even looking up. I walked up the stairs, each step echoing, not with loneliness, but with solid conviction.
They all thought I was fading away. They thought I was a broken old man.
But they forgot the simplest rule of building anything: foundations don't fade. They hold. They wait. And when the timing is perfect, they remind everyone who built the whole damn house on top of them.
I was going to remind them very soon. The next morning, I was awake before the sun again.
Sleep wasn't interested in me much anymore, but this time, it wasn't just age keeping me up. It was a sense of purpose, a string buried in the dust of the years that was now pulling me forward. I sat down at my desk upstairs, a chunky oak piece that was one of my first projects.
The drawers groaned as I pulled them open.
Faded envelopes, tax receipts yellowed with time, manuals for machines that quit running years ago. It was layers of a life fully lived. But tucked beneath all that junk in the bottom drawer, carefully taped to the wood panel, was the thing I was hunting for.
A thick manila envelope.
I peeled it free, my fingers shaking slightly, not out of weakness, but because of the powerful weight of the memory it carried. Inside was the actual deed to the house, the one I signed way back when my hair was dark and my back didn't complain every time I moved. Back when Jason was still a boy following me with a toy dump truck, begging to help. But this wasn't some basic deed. I pictured the lawyer's office, small and lined floor to ceiling with books that smelled like ink and old paper.
I remembered my question to him: how do I ensure this place always stays in the right hands? How do I keep it from being sold or broken up if I'm gone?
He leaned back, his spectacles down low on his nose.
There are ways, Frank. Clauses.
You can tie ownership to specific conditions, to behavior, to family standing.
And that's exactly what I did. I read the text over again now.
My eyes were slower, but my mind was crystal clear. The conditions were airtight.
As long as I was alive, no one had the power to kick me out of this home. Not legally, not by bullying, not even if blood ties decided to turn sour.
I allowed myself a private, slow smile.
The kind no one was ever supposed to see. Tiffany's plotting. Caleb's cruelty. Jason's cowardice.
They honestly thought they could delete me with some harsh talk and cold shoulders. They failed to do their research.
Paper remembers. People forget.
A light tap at the door pulled me back to the present.
Grandpa? It was Chloe's voice.
Come on in, I said, quickly sliding the deed back into the envelope and burying it under a stack of old photo albums. She stepped inside, her hair loose around her shoulders.
You're always up before the sun. Old habits die hard, I replied. The sunrise doesn't like waiting for me, so I don't wait for it. She gave me a slight smile and came closer. Dad wants to know if you're coming along today.
He's driving Mom to the city to go shopping for.
Well, I think it's furniture.
Furniture, I thought, knowing full well what it meant. Yeah, she said quietly, dropping her eyes. For the downstairs. They said it needs a fresh start.
A fresh start.
Those words hit me hard. They wanted to cleanse every corner of the house I still touched. I reached out and squeezed her hand gently.
You go with them if you like, sweetheart.
I'll be fine right here. She paused, then shook her head.
I'd rather stay.
For a second, I saw the little girl in her, the one who used to follow me into the garden, wanting to know about every bug and plant.
She was older now, stuck between loyalties she didn't choose. I realized she was the only ally I had in the whole place. Then help me with something, I said. What is it? She asked.
I pulled a heavy, dusty ledger out of the desk. This holds the records from when this place was actually built.
Every nail, every board. I kept track of every single thing. I looked at her.
I think it's high time someone else in this house knew the true story. Her eyes went wide as she opened the pages.
You wrote all this down? Every single number?
I did, I confirmed. Because I knew, one day, someone would ask who really built this place.
And I wanted the answer ready and waiting.
She traced her finger along the faded ink.
Grandpa, why are you showing me all this?
Because you need to remember what they've completely forgotten, I told her.
This place didn't just appear out of nowhere. It came from work. My work.
Her lips tightened, as if she wanted to say more but couldn't bring herself to.
Instead, she just nodded, understanding.
The call to arms. Hours later, the rest of them rolled up back at the house, laden with shopping bags and big, fake smiles.
I watched them from the front porch.
Tiffany's voice was loud, Jason was lugging boxes, and Caleb was loudly bragging about some dumb purchase. They looked straight past me as if I were already a ghost haunting the front frame of the building.
But I wasn't a ghost. Not yet.
That night, after they were all asleep, I sat back down at my desk. I dialed a number I hadn't used in almost a decade. The phone rang twice before a tired but familiar voice answered. Frank? Yeah, I said quietly. It's been a long time, Thomas. A pause, then a short, dry chuckle. You only call me when everything's gone to hell. Then you know why I'm calling, I replied. Still have those papers on file? I do, I said. And I think it's about time we reminded them what those papers actually mean. Silence stretched across the line. Then the voice of Thomas Miller, my old lawyer, softened. Be careful, Frank. Paper can certainly protect, but it can also completely destroy. Are you prepared for that? I looked out the window. The house was dark and silent, still breathing with the memories of decades. My house. Yes, I whispered. I'm ready. When I hung up the phone, I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced in months. Not despair, not loneliness. Pure, sharp resolve. They thought the old man was done. But I had just started writing the next chapter. The following week, I left the house before anyone else woke up. My old Ford F-150 coughed twice before the engine finally caught, sounding like it resented being pulled from its long rest. I hadn't driven it in nearly a year, but that morning, the steering wheel felt solid and familiar in my hands. The town hadn't changed much. Same greasy diner with a cracked sign, same hardware store window crammed with dusty equipment. But as I drove, I thought about how much I had been forced to change. I pulled up in front of a small brick building with gold letters fading across the glass, Miller & Company Legal. Inside, the air smelled of musty paper and furniture polish. Behind the front desk, an older man looked up from a stack of files. His hair was thinner, his glasses thicker, but his eyes were just as sharp and precise as ever. Frank Williams, he said, standing up. Well, I'll be damned. Thought I'd only see your name in an obituary next. I managed a faint smile. Not yet, Thomas. We shook hands. His grip was a little weaker, but still firm. He led me into his office, the same cramped space I remembered. Books lined the walls, floor to ceiling. Why now? Thomas asked, settling into his chair. Why, after all this time? I slid the manila envelope across his big desk. Because they've forgotten, and I have to remind them. He opened it, adjusting his glasses as he read the old document. Ah, the deed. You really held onto this thing all these years. Smart move. I had a feeling, I said. Back then, I didn't know who I was protecting it from. Now, I do. Thomas looked at me intently. It's airtight. They can't touch this place. Not legally. But Frank, if you head down this road, it won't just be paper. It's going to be a war inside those walls. I leaned forward on his desk. They declared war the instant my own grandson told me I wasn't family. The silence hung heavy between us. Then Thomas nodded once. All right, then. We'll sharpen the edges. That evening, when I got back home, I found the living room practically emptied, furniture gone, walls stripped bare. Tiffany was standing in the middle of the chaos, clipboard in hand, snapping orders at 2 delivery guys. Careful with that. It's an antique. She stopped short when she saw me. Oh, you're back. Her tone wasn't even close to polite, it was pure dismissal. What exactly is going on here? I asked, though I knew the answer. Fresh start, she said. We're redesigning the whole space. Making it ours. Ours, I repeated. My voice was low, but it cut through the room noise. Jason walked in then, his arms full of curtain rods. He froze when he saw me. For a split second, guilt flashed across his face, but then it hardened. Dad, please don't start. We just need the house to feel like us. I cut him off. Yes, I've heard that one. Caleb appeared behind him, smirking. It's about time this place stopped looking like a museum. No offense, Grandpa. No offense, I said slowly.
is exactly what people say right before they mean the opposite. The room snapped with tension.
Even the moving men looked uncomfortable.
I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue.
Instead, I simply walked past them, climbed the stairs, and closed the door to my room.
But behind that door, I wasn't running away. I was drawing up the final plan. Later that night, Chloe tapped softly on the door. "Grandpa." "Come in," I said.
She slipped inside, closing the door behind her.
Her eyes were puffy and red. She'd been crying. "They're changing everything," she whispered. "The house doesn't even feel like home anymore." "It will," I told her. "Trust me." She sat on the edge of the bed, twisting her hands. Do you have a plan?" I looked at my granddaughter, caught in the eye of a storm she didn't create. She deserved the truth, or at least a powerful piece of it. "Yes," I said. "But it's not the kind of plan that makes noise. It's the kind that leaves a mark no one can ever take back." "What do you mean?" she asked. I pulled the dusty ledger from the drawer again, opening it to a page full of numbers and signatures. "See this line?" She leaned closer. "Yes. That's where I made sure no one, not your father, not your grandmother, not even Caleb, can force me out. Not while I'm still breathing. This house is mine until the day I decide otherwise." Her eyes went wide. "So, they can't sell it?" "No," I said firmly. "They can try. They can scream. They can rearrange the furniture. They can even pretend I don't exist. But this house knows who built it. And the law remembers, even if they choose not to." She let out a shaky breath. "Then what happens now?" I closed the ledger, sliding it back into the drawer. "Now we wait. And when the right time comes, we'll show them the truth." A few days later, I heard Jason on the phone downstairs. His voice carried clearly up the stairwell. "Yes, the listing should be ready by next month. Yes, the property's value is extremely high, especially with the renovations. We'll be able to move very quickly once the papers are sorted." I sat at the top of the stairs, listening. So that was it. They weren't just redecorating. They were actively preparing to sell the entire place. And in that moment, a cold clarity settled inside me. Not sadness, not even anger, but pure, cutting resolve. They wanted the house and not the man who built it. That night, I wrote a letter. Not just to Jason or Tiffany, but to the whole extended family, cousins, uncles, neighbors, the very people who sat at the oak table when Caleb called me a stranger. The ones who looked away, making them complicit in the silence. They would all get a copy. A reminder of who poured the foundation they were all standing on. And when the day came to unveil it, there wouldn't be any laughter left. Just the crushing silence of the truth. The Sunday verdict. Sunday dinner was always a tradition in this family. Long before Tiffany turned them into orchestrated stage plays, my late wife Marilyn and I hosted them simply: roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread. The food mattered less than the warmth. It was where Jason learned to use a fork and knife, where Caleb took his first shaky steps under that massive oak table. But this Sunday was different. I could feel it before I even entered the dining room. The air was tight, the laughter brittle, as if everyone was just playing a role. Tiffany stood at the head of the table, setting plates with the precision of royalty. Jason hovered by the window, phone glued to his palm, whispering about market values and closing dates. Caleb sprawled in his chair, smirking at jokes only he seemed to get. And at the far end sat Chloe, her eyes darting toward me every few seconds, filled with a mixture of fear and hope. She knew. She was the only one who knew what I carried in the inside pocket of my sports coat. The letter. The same cousins, uncles, and neighbors who had been here the night Caleb delivered his insult were here again. Their eyes were fixed on the feast, on the wine, on anything but me. I sat down quietly, not at the head, but at the side. I wanted them to be completely comfortable. I wanted them to feel absolutely secure. Tiffany clinked her glass sharply. "Everyone, thank you so much for being here.
It truly means the world to us that we can share this home with all of you. She said this home as if the deed were already in her manicured hand.
The room hummed with agreement, forks scraping, glasses raising. No one spoke to me. No one even looked my way.
That's when I slowly placed my hands on the envelope in my pocket.
Dinner proceeded, courses arriving one by one.
The conversation flowed like a river carrying me further away from their shore. Jason laughed with his cousin about investment strategies.
Tiffany bragged about her plans for the property.
Caleb cracked a stupid joke about how Grandpa's old chair creaks louder than the stairs. Each jab didn't hurt because it was cruel, but because of the complete indifference that followed.
Nobody defended me. Nobody paused. I was just furniture.
An old, cracked painting on the wall, familiar and entirely invisible. When dessert was served, I stood up slowly, deliberately.
The laughter instantly died down. A few forks froze mid-air.
I won't take up much of your time, I said, my voice steady, carrying clearly across the table.
I just have a quick statement to read. Jason frowned. Dad, can this wait?
It won't take long, I cut in.
Tiffany set down her glass with an audible sigh. Frank, really?
But I was already unfolding the first sheet of the letter.
My hands didn't shake.
My voice did not falter.
To my family, I began.
You may look at this house as yours now. You may eat at this table, redecorate the walls, speak of selling it, laugh about its old creaks, and pretend its foundation grew from nowhere.
I paused, letting my gaze sweep across every face. But let me remind you.
Every single brick you sit between, every dollar that paid for this meal, every tree shading this yard, came from me.
A low murmur rippled across the table.
Tiffany's eyes narrowed, and Jason shifted uncomfortably. Caleb tried to keep his smirk, but it dissolved when he felt the sudden, complete silence around him.
I continued.
For years, I worked double shifts, saved every penny, and built credit, not just for myself, but for this family. When you were children, this home was your playground. When you were grown, it was your refuge. And when Marilyn died, it was my anchor. My voice sharpened. And yet, right at this very table, my own grandson told me, I am not family.
Gasps.
Whispers. I snapped to Caleb, whose face instantly turned deep red.
He stammered, "Oh, come on, Grandpa." I raised my hand, cutting him off completely.
My voice dropped to a cold, powerful clarity.
"Not family," he said. "And none of you spoke up. Not one word of defense. Silence is agreement. And in that silence, you erased me."
I let those words sink in, heavy and toxic, into the room. Then, I unfolded the second sheet, the heavier one, the deed. So tonight, let me offer you a truth written not in sentiment or memory, but in law.
I held the paper up. This house is mine. Legally. Fully. Irrevocably. Not Jason's. Not Tiffany's. Not Caleb's. Mine.
I laid the document flat on the table, sliding it toward the center.
I hold the deed, signed and sealed decades ago. You can paint these walls. You can host these dinners. You can even dream of selling it. But without my written consent, you own nothing here but the air you breathe. The room completely exploded. What?
Jason shot to his feet, his face ghostly pale.
Dad, you can't just.
Tiffany's voice cut in, high and sharp.
You're bluffing. That paper is worthless. I simply pointed to the document. See for yourself.
The cousins leaned in, whispers flying like sparks.
It's real, one muttered. Frank's name is right there.
Tiffany snatched it up, scanning furiously, her lips pressed into a thin, white line.
Jason rubbed his temples, pacing as if walking would somehow erase the ink. Caleb sat completely frozen, mouth hanging open, caught between utter disbelief and pure, helpless fury. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply delivered the final blow. You forgot one critical thing. You forgot that I'm still here.
While you erased me in words, I remained in stone and in paper.
In every corner of this house. You may want me gone, but you can't erase the truth. Not tonight. Not ever. The silence that followed was entirely different now. It wasn't awkward or dismissive. It was heavy, and it was shameful.
Chloe's eyes glistened, pride finally flashing through her tears.
I'm giving you all 30 days to consider this fact.
30 days to remember who you actually are and who I am.
Because after that, my lawyer will be in touch, and the only question that will remain is whether I decide to let you stay here or kick you out of the life I built.
She was the first to clap, just once, soft and quick.
It wasn't about cheering, it was about acknowledging the truth.
And in that single sound from Chloe, the whole power structure in that room tilted.
No one was laughing now. No one was raising a glass.
For the first time in forever, they were forced to actually see me. That night, after the guests slipped away in a confusion of whispers, Tiffany stormed right into my room.
You humiliated us.
She spat, her voice a low hiss.
In front of everyone we know. I looked at her calmly. No, I reminded you. There's a big difference. She pointed a finger at me that was actually shaking. You think this is finished? You think one old piece of paper makes you untouchable?
I leaned back in my chair, completely steady.
Untouchable? No. Unmovable? Yes. There's a difference there, too, Tiffany.
Her eyes were blazing, but she had run completely out of words. She slammed the door behind her so hard the glass rattled.
Alone in the sudden quiet, I let a smile form.
It wasn't a loud, triumphant sneer, just a solid, quiet one. Because for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't a ghost. They had seen me, and they were going to remember.
The morning after the dinner, the house was quieter than a tomb.
No clinking plates, no laughter bleeding through the walls, just a thick, uneasy silence.
I was up before dawn, same as always, heating water for coffee and sitting by the kitchen window.
The steam curled up, the smell earthy and comforting.
For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. But I knew what this silence meant. It wasn't peace. It was planning.
By mid-morning, I heard them downstairs. Jason's voice was low and urgent. Tiffany's was sharper, cutting in like a switchblade.
We cannot let him pull this stunt, Tiffany snapped. Do you understand what he did last night? In front of everyone I work with. Jason muttered, I know. But yelling won't fix it.
You are missing the point, she stressed.
They saw the deed, Jason.
They saw it with their own eyes. He made us look like squatters in our own home.
There was a loaded pause. Then Jason let out a defeated sigh. I'll call Roger.
The name hit me like a stone dropped into still water.
Roger, his lawyer buddy.
A guy who made a living finding loopholes and who once bragged at a company barbecue about making problems disappear for clients.
So, they were going to fight. Not with words, not with guilt, but with the law. I stayed upstairs, listening. Caleb wandered into the conversation.
His voice held that entitled smugness of a kid who never earned a thing but assumed everything was his for the taking.
So what if Grandpa's name is on it? Caleb said. He's ancient.
He barely uses half the house.
We'll find a way. Power of attorney, maybe.
Or, I don't know, just declare him unfit.
Declare me unfit.
The phrase landed in my chest, heavier than Caleb's careless, following laugh.
Tiffany instantly seized the idea. Exactly. He's been living alone too long. People will believe it. We just need the right medical paperwork. Jason hesitated. That's extreme, Tiffany.
But she pressed on, her voice turning to steel.
Do you want to lose this house? Do you want everyone whispering about how your own father humiliated you? Because that is exactly what they are doing right now.
You saw their faces.
Do you want to live with that shame?
Jason didn't answer, which, based on 3 decades of marriage, meant agreement.
The gauntlet is thrown. Later that afternoon, the phone rang in my room.
I let it buzz 3 times before picking it up.
Mr. Williams?
A clipped, polished voice asked.
This is Robert Pierce, attorney. I represent your son, Jason, and his wife, Tiffany. I smiled to myself, though he couldn't see it.
The voice was smooth, rehearsed, just like a shark's skin. They have concerns about your ability to manage the property, Pierce continued.
They'd like to discuss options before taking further steps. Further steps? I asked.
Guardianship, transfer of authority. We can handle this quietly, Mr. Williams, or it can get messy.
Your choice.
I let the dead air hang until even he sounded a little fidgety.
Then I spoke calmly. Mr. Pierce, I've been underestimated my entire life. By bosses, by banks, even by my own family.
But let me assure you, the single biggest mistake people always make is assuming silence means weakness. If they wish to pursue this, tell them I'll be ready.
And I hung up the phone. That night, Chloe came by. She slipped in, her presence soft but desperate. Grandpa, she whispered, they're serious. I overheard Dad talking on the phone. Mom is already drafting something.
They want to push you out legally. Her hands were trembling. She was 22, too young to carry this heavy weight, yet here she was, the only one bearing the truth. I placed my hand over hers, calming her.
Chloe, let them try.
Her eyes widened.
But
I'm not afraid of their papers, Chloe.
I have my own. And more than that, I have something they will never understand.
I paused for effect.
Patience. The next few days felt like a low-stakes game of chess.
Tiffany paraded new neighbors through the house, dropping sly hints about making major changes soon. Jason stayed out late, probably with Roger, preparing the petition they thought would erase me. Caleb strutted around like an heir, already mentally claiming rooms as his kingdom. But I was playing my own moves, quietly.
I visited the county records office.
I got copies of the deed, notarized, stamped, and completely irrefutable. I requested a full title history showing the house had been mine since the day Marilyn and I signed the papers. I secured every scrap of evidence I needed to meet their storm head-on. At the bank, I updated my accounts, put extra safeguards in place, and arranged for all statements to come directly to my lawyer's office, not the shared address. At the lawyer's office, my lawyer and old friend, Thomas, explained the situation.
Thomas leaned back in his chair, adjusting his spectacles. They'll try to prove you incompetent, Frank. Your job is to prove otherwise. Doctor's notes, evaluations, witnesses.
You are sharp, my friend. Sharper than most men half your age.
They will regret underestimating you. I nodded. Good. Let's begin.
The real twist came a week later.
Tiffany hosted another dinner.
This one was smaller, more exclusive, just close family and Robert Pierce, who was introduced under the pretense of being a family friend. I sat at the table, quiet, observing. Robert smiled too much, laughed too easily, his eyes constantly calculating everything he saw. Halfway through the meal, Tiffany tapped her glass lightly. "Dad," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness.
"We've been thinking.
It's a huge amount of work managing this house alone. All the bills, the upkeep, the responsibilities.
Wouldn't it be easier if you just let us help?
We could take some of the burden off your shoulders."
I set down my fork. "And by help, you mean sign it all over?" Jason cleared his throat nervously. "It's not like that, Dad. We just want what's truly best for you."
Robert Pierce chimed in, his voice smooth as warmed oil.
"Mr. Williams, these things happen all the time. Families consolidate assets, streamline responsibilities.
You wouldn't have to worry about a thing anymore." I leaned back, studying each face, Tiffany's forced concern, Jason's nervous sweat, Caleb's restless tapping on his phone.
And Chloe. Chloe sitting quietly, biting her lip, silently praying I wouldn't surrender. Finally, I spoke. You know, I've been thinking, too. About burdens. About responsibility. And about how easy it is to mistake them for chains. Tiffany smiled, thinking she had me cornered. Exactly, Dad. I cut her off. But you forget something. Chains can be broken. Burdens can be shifted. And responsibility? Responsibility stays with the one who earned it. The room completely froze. Robert Pierce's professional smile actually twitched. Mr. Williams. I leaned forward, my voice low and completely deliberate. This house is mine. My name is on every line that matters. And if you push me, if you file one piece of paper, if you whisper one more word about my competence, then I will not only defend what is mine, I will expose every lie, every manipulation, every humiliation you have thrown my way. And I promise you, the shame you feel tonight will be nothing compared to what's coming. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Caleb finally muttered, "You're bluffing." I looked at him steadily. Try me. The probate petition. That night, long after they were all asleep, I sat again at the kitchen table. The house creaked, not in betrayal this time, but as if it were holding its breath with me. I wasn't naive. I knew they would push harder. But I also knew something they didn't: revenge doesn't need to shout. It waits. It builds. And mine was only just getting started. The letter came on a Tuesday. A crisp, white envelope slid under the front door sometime between dawn and mid-morning. I knew it wasn't a bill. No, this one had the kind of solid weight that only stamped court paper carries. When I bent down and picked it up, the seal told me everything: County Court Probate Division. They had done it. I sat at the table, the envelope unopened, sipping my coffee slowly. The sound of the spoon tapping the porcelain was steady, intentional. Finally, I tore it open. Inside was the notice: Jason and Tiffany had filed a petition for guardianship, citing concerns over Frank Williams's capacity to manage his estate. Concerns. That was the soft little word they chose. Not proof, not evidence. Concerns. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was almost a grim amusement. After all these years of raising Jason, this was his final play, to declare me incompetent. But the true sting came after, not from the paper itself, but from the realization that my own blood, my son, looked at me and decided I wasn't fit to stand on my own 2 feet. That betrayal weighed heavier than any court summons. That evening, I didn't hide the letter. I placed it right in the center of the dining table where everyone could see it. Jason noticed first when he walked in with Tiffany trailing behind. His eyes darted to mine, then down to the paper. Dad, Tiffany cut him off, stepping forward. It's for your own good, Frank. You've been struggling. The house is simply too much. The decisions, the finances. I stood up, slow and deliberate, my hands resting on the back of the chair. Struggling. My voice was calm, but it held an edge sharp enough to cut through her practiced tone. You forget, I built this house with my own hands. Brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. If that's your definition of struggling, then I suppose I've been struggling my entire life. Caleb, lounging nearby, smirked. Grandpa, it's not personal. It's just practical. You can't hang on to everything forever. Chloe's fork clattered against her plate. How can you say that, Caleb? He's your grandfather. Caleb shrugged, his eyes never leaving his phone. And that doesn't mean he gets to drag us all down with him. The words sliced deeper than he realized. I didn't flinch, though. I just let the silence linger until even Tiffany's fake smile faltered. Then I spoke. Fine. Let the court decide. But understand this, the law isn't swayed by whispers at a dinner table. It listens to evidence. And I have plenty. The next morning, I went to see Thomas, my lawyer. His office smelled of old books and worn leather, the kind of place where truth felt heavier than lies. He skimmed through the petition, his brow furrowing with each line.
They're pushing incompetence, Thomas said flatly.
They'll try to claim you can't manage your affairs. It's an underhanded move, but it's not rare.
He leaned back, tapping the paper.
They'll need proof.
Doctors' evaluations, testimonies.
They don't have that. You're clear-headed, Frank.
Hell, you're sharper than most people I see walk through here.
I smiled faintly. So, we fight.
His lips curled into a grin.
We don't just fight. We prepare. Medical evaluations, witnesses, financial statements, all of it completely airtight.
When we're done, they won't just lose the case.
They'll regret ever filing it. A week later, I had my first evaluation.
The doctor, a stern but fair woman, asked me every question under the sun: dates, numbers, memory recall, and current events.
I answered each without hesitation.
At the end, she set her pen down.
Mr. Williams, she said. You're not just competent, you're precise. I'll be happy to testify to that. That night, I tucked the evaluation into my growing file of documents, deeds, bank statements, notarized letters. My fortress of paper was rising, stronger with every page. But revenge isn't just about defense. It's about finding the cracks in your opponent's armor. And that's exactly where Chloe helped me.
One evening, she came to my room with her laptop, her face pale but completely determined.
Grandpa, you need to see this.
She turned the screen toward me.
Emails. Dozens of them, between Tiffany and Robert Pierce.
They didn't mean for me to find this, Chloe whispered. I was using Mom's computer to print something, and the account was still logged in.
I read the lines, my hands steady, though my heart pounded. Tiffany wasn't just pushing guardianship.
She and Robert were discussing ways to access my accounts before the petition was even filed.
If we can get Frank declared unfit, one email read, we can transfer the funds without delay. Jason will follow along. He always does. So there it was. Not concern. Not family duty. Pure, unadulterated greed. The final twist came a few nights later during another tense dinner.
Tiffany poured herself wine, her eyes glittering with false patience.
Dad, she said sweetly. The court date's coming up. You can save everyone the trouble if you just sign over the power of attorney now. We'll handle the rest. I set down my fork. You've really thought of everything, haven't you?
Her smile sharpened.
It's not about us. It's about protecting you. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded sheet of paper. The email. I slid it across the table, watching her face as she read her own words. Color completely drained from her cheeks. Jason leaned over, confusion instantly morphing into panic. Caleb raised his eyebrows, finally paying attention. I leaned back. Protecting me, Tiffany? Or protecting your access to my accounts? She stammered. Where did you get that? Let's just say, I replied softly. Paper speaks louder than noise.
The room fell into an immediate, heavy silence. Even Caleb looked rattled.
Chloe's eyes met mine. And in that quiet moment, we both knew the entire tide had turned.
That night, alone at the kitchen table, I opened the folder of documents, deeds, evaluations, proof of competence, and now, their own words, evidence of their malicious intent. They thought they were playing chess, moving their pieces with careful silence. But they hadn't noticed that the old king was still standing, quietly biding his time. Now that Frank has Tiffany's emails, he holds irrefutable proof of malice and financial motivation. This evidence, combined with his solid legal standing, the deed, and the medical evaluation proving his competence, flips the entire case. Frank's next move shouldn't be defensive, it should be an offensive, preemptive strike that forces them to retreat before the court hearing.
He needs to use the proof to create maximum, immediate leverage.
Here is the continuation, focusing on the tactical use of the evidence. The house groaned softly, the wood settling in the night. To Tiffany and Jason, that probably sounded like decay, a sign of age and weakness. But to me, it was the sound of breathing, steady, patient, and very much alive.
The battle wasn't over. Not even close.
It was just starting, and I was ready for every single move they had. The courthouse was colder than I expected, but not from the relentless hum of the air conditioning. It was cold in spirit. The marble floors gleamed, reflecting every hurried step and nervous shuffle. People filed in and out, clutching documents, their whispers bouncing off the walls like trapped birds. I walked in slowly, my cane tapping lightly on the floor. I didn't need it, but I wanted them to see me, steady, deliberate, a man who was fully in control of his steps. Chloe was right by my side, gripping her notebook, her chin held high with a defiance she didn't bother to hide. Jason and Tiffany were already there, huddled with Robert Pierce and Caleb, their lawyer leaning in close. Tiffany's eyes flicked toward me, quick, sharp, then back down to her papers.
Jason avoided my gaze completely.
Caleb managed to smirk, acting like this was some kind of easy game he'd already won. The bailiff's voice cut through the low chatter.
Case number 4821 in re-guardianship of Frank Williams.
The judge was a tall woman with steel gray hair pulled back tight, her glasses low on her nose. Her voice carried authority without needing to be loud. We are here today to determine the petition for guardianship filed by Jason Williams and Tiffany Williams concerning the alleged incapacity of Mr. Frank Williams. Her eyes landed on me, sharp and assessing.
Mr. Williams, are you prepared to proceed? I rose slowly, nodding once. Yes, Your Honor.
Tiffany and Jason's lawyer, Robert, started the attack. He painted a picture of me as frail, confused, and incapable of managing even simple affairs. He described a man who left bills unpaid, who forgot names, who was a danger to himself. Each sentence was loaded with rehearsed concern, though everyone in the room could hear the real goal: they wanted control. I sat still, hands folded, never interrupting.
Paper speaks louder than noise.
Then Thomas, my lawyer, stood up. He was calm, his words precise. Your Honor, what we have here is not concern for Mr. Williams's well-being.
We have greed.
We have a calculated attempt to strip a man of his rights, orchestrated by those who stand to benefit financially.
And we have proof. He motioned to me. Mr. Williams, would you take the stand? The walk to the witness stand felt longer than it was.
I placed my hand on the Bible, swore my oath, and took my seat.
Thomas asked me simple questions first: dates, numbers, recent events.
I answered them all clearly, deliberately. Not rushed, not hesitant. Just steady. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable but attentive.
Next came the medical evaluations.
The doctor testified, her voice calm and authoritative. In my professional opinion, Mr. Williams is fully competent. His cognitive abilities are sharp, his memory precise. He is entirely capable of managing his own affairs. Robert Pierce shifted uncomfortably, flipping pages he clearly no longer wanted to read aloud. Then Thomas pulled the final card. He handed the bailiff a packet of printed emails, Tiffany's own words, conspiring with Robert. The judge read them silently, her lips pressing into a thin, tight line. Then she looked up, her gaze piercing Tiffany like a laser.
Mrs. Williams, she said. How do you explain this? Tiffany stammered. They're out of context.
I was just discussing hypothetical situations. The judge cut her off sharply.
Hypothetical situations about transferring funds from an estate you don't yet control?
Jason buried his face in his hands.
Caleb's smirk vanished. Robert sank lower in his seat, looking ill. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Your Honor, I said softly. I may be old.
My hands may shake when I lift my coffee cup.
My knees may ache when I climb the stairs. But incompetence? No.
I paused, making sure every person in the room heard the next line. What they've mistaken for weakness is patience.
What they've mistaken for confusion is restraint.
I built my life with hard work and sacrifice, and I will not hand it over to those who confuse love with entitlement. The silence in the room was different this time, heavy, undeniable, and weighted with shame. The judge finally spoke.
The petition is denied.
Mr. Williams is competent and will retain full control of his estate. She did not stop there. Furthermore, this court finds that the petitioners acted in bad faith.
Future actions of this nature will not be tolerated. The gavel struck sharp, final.
Afterward, as people shuffled out, Tiffany's face was pale, her hands trembling as she grabbed her things.
Jason wouldn't meet my eyes.
Caleb muttered something, but his old bravado was gone, completely shattered by the echo of the gavel.
Chloe squeezed my hand. You did it, Grandpa.
I looked down at her, my voice steady.
No, Chloe. We did it.
That evening, I sat at the same oak table where the betrayal had first been spoken aloud. The house groaned quietly, as if exhaling the tension it had been holding.
I set the court papers down, neat and precise. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. Families don't unravel in a single court ruling. There would be whispers, retaliation, and attempts to regroup.
But the foundation had been shifted forever.
They had utterly underestimated me. They thought age meant surrender. Instead, it meant endurance. And endurance wins wars. The new arrangement. The night after the hearing, the house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the brittle silence of a place holding its breath. I sat alone at the oak table. Chloe walked in carrying 2 mugs of tea.
She set one down in front of me, her hands trembling only slightly.
Grandpa, she said. You won today. You proved them wrong. I nodded, wrapping my fingers around the warmth of the cup. Yes, Chloe. But proving them wrong doesn't mean you've won the war.
It just means the fighting has shifted. The family dinner that followed was less a celebration and more a truce after a failed ambush. Tiffany avoided my eyes completely, her fork scraping her plate with small, sharp movements. Jason spoke only when directly asked, his words clipped. Caleb sat stiffly, his arrogance punctured but not entirely gone.
Robert Pierce didn't show up.
Finally, Jason cleared his throat.
Dad, I didn't want it to come to this.
The guardianship thing.
We were just worried about you. I set my fork down, slowly, deliberately. Worried? Or interested? The clink of metal on porcelain echoed louder than his weak excuse.
Tiffany jumped in, her voice brittle.
We thought maybe you couldn't handle everything anymore. It wasn't malicious, Frank.
I looked at her, then at Jason, my eyes steady.
Emails don't lie, Tiffany. Neither do bank records. Malice isn't always shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes it's planning dinners around what you'll gain when someone else is gone.
The room froze.
Caleb muttered, we were just thinking about the future.
I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking beneath me.
And you thought the future didn't include me.
Later that night, when everyone had scattered, Chloe found me on the porch. She pulled her sweater tight, her face pale in the moonlight.
They don't understand, she whispered. They think money is the whole story. They don't see you.
I put my hand on hers. That's the mistake they've made their whole lives, Chloe.
They see what I own, not who I am.
She hesitated, then leaned closer.
What are you going to do now? The question hung in the cool night air.
For the first time in weeks, I smiled, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that knows exactly what comes next. I'm going to remind them, I said softly, in a way they'll never forget.
The reminder began quietly.
I called my lawyer, Thomas, again.
Draw up the papers, I told him. All of it.
The trusts, the transfers, the final revisions.
He didn't ask why. He just said, I'll have them ready. 2 days later, I invited the family back for another gathering. They came, though reluctance showed clearly in their eyes. Maybe they thought I'd softened. Maybe they thought I wanted reconciliation. They sat at the oak table again, that cursed and sacred piece of wood.
The house seemed to hold its breath, listening. I stood at the head of the table, papers neatly stacked in my hands. My cane rested against the chair, though I wasn't using it. I called you here, I began, because families shouldn't be decided in courtrooms.
They should be decided in homes. Jason shifted uneasily. Tiffany crossed her arms. Caleb tapped his fingers against the wood.
Chloe sat silently, her gaze fixed on me. I placed the papers down.
This is the future you wanted to rush me into. My estate. My property. My house. You wanted control, so I'm giving you an answer.
I slid the top page across the table. Caleb grabbed it, scanning, and the color drained from his face.
What is this? He muttered.
Jason snatched it, his eyes widening in shock.
You changed everything.
Tiffany leaned forward, her voice sharp.
This says we're not beneficiaries anymore. I nodded, utterly calm. Correct. I've moved my entire estate into a trust. Chloe is the sole beneficiary.
Every brick, every dollar, every memory, it all went to her.
The silence was shattered.
Caleb slammed his hand on the table.
You can't just erase us.
I looked at him, my voice steady as stone.
You erased me first. Remember? The room erupted. Jason tried to argue.
Tiffany's voice was shrill.
Caleb was furious.
But none of it mattered. The papers were signed, sealed, and legal. Their noise was just noise.
The paper had spoken.
Chloe sat frozen, her lips parted in shock.
She whispered, "Grandpa, I didn't ask for this."
I turned to her, my eyes softening.
I know you didn't. That's exactly why you deserve it.
That night, long after they had stormed out, the house finally felt different.
Not quiet, not heavy, but alive.
Chloe sat beside me, her head resting on my shoulder.
They'll never forgive you, she said. I took a slow breath. Forgiveness isn't the point, Chloe. Memory is. They will remember this night.
They will remember that I was not erased, that I had the final word. And as the house exhaled, as the oak table gleamed under the dim light, I knew the war was over. Not because I destroyed them, but because I had claimed myself again.
The morning after the storm, I woke to sunlight spilling through the curtains.
For the first time in months, it didn't feel like an intruder.
It felt like an old friend warming the edges of a life I thought had turned permanently cold. Chloe was already awake.
I found her in the kitchen making coffee, humming faintly. She looked up when I walked in and smiled so genuinely it cut right through the residue of bitterness clinging to me.
"Grandpa," she said softly, handing me a cup. "Do you feel lighter?"
I took the coffee, inhaling the steam.
"Yes," I said. "But lighter isn't always peace.
Sometimes it's just the weight of one battle gone, while others wait their turn." She tilted her head, studying me the way only someone who truly sees you can.
"Do you regret it? Cutting them out?"
I sat down at the oak table, the battlefield of words, the silent witness to betrayal and justice.
Running my fingers along its grooves, I let the question hang. "No," I answered finally. "I don't regret it. What I regret is that it came to this."
That love turned into ledgers and blood turned into bargaining chips.
Days passed. The house settled. Tiffany, Jason, and Caleb didn't come back. Not a call, not a message. The silence was their protest, their punishment, perhaps even their shame. I didn't expect reconciliation. I no longer longed for it.
One evening, as I sat on the porch, Chloe joined me carrying a box. "I found this in the attic," she said, setting it beside me. It was old, covered in dust.
I opened it slowly.
Inside were photographs, yellowed letters, and small toys. My grandson Caleb's toy car sat right on top, its paint chipped but the wheels still intact.
Chloe picked it up. "This was his?" "Yes," I said, my voice low. "I gave it to him when he was 5. He carried it everywhere. I thought moments like that would carry us forever." Chloe placed the car back carefully. "Maybe it carried him further than you think."
Maybe he just forgot how far he'd come with you holding him. Her words lodged in my chest.
Perhaps forgetting was the true betrayal, not malice.
Weeks later, Thomas, my lawyer, stopped by with the final paperwork. As he left, he shook my hand firmly.
Mr. Williams, most men wait too long. You acted in time.
I nodded, but after he drove away, I stood staring at the driveway.
Acting in time.
It was a phrase meant to comfort, yet it carried its own ache.
Time was both ally and thief. That night, Chloe and I sat together again. She asked me quietly, "What will you do with the rest of your days, Grandpa?"
I thought of the house, the silence, the fracture of family ties. Then I thought of the laughter of neighbors, the choir at church, the garden out back waiting to bloom again.
I will live, I said simply. Not in their shadow, not in bitterness. I will live and let this house live again.
But fate, it seemed, had one more twist to deliver.
A letter arrived, written in shaky handwriting.
It was from Jason.
"Dad," it began. "I don't expect forgiveness.
I don't expect to be in your will or even at your table again.
But I need you to know, it wasn't just greed. It was fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of watching you fade and not knowing how to stop it. I was wrong. We were wrong. Caleb doesn't see it yet, and Tiffany may never. But I do.
If nothing else, I want to thank you for reminding me where I came from, and for reminding me that silence doesn't mean absence."
I read it 3 times. Each word felt like both a balm and a blade. Chloe touched my arm. "Are you going to answer him?" I folded the letter slowly, sliding it back into its envelope. "Not yet. Sometimes silence is the only reply that carries weight. He needs to sit with what he wrote."
In the weeks that followed, I rebuilt not walls or wealth, but the rhythm of a life worth living.
Chloe and I planted roses in the garden.
I began writing letters of my own, not to send, but to leave behind. Letters of memory, of truth, of the love that existed before it was corrupted. And in the quiet moments, I sat at the oak table and thought of the night Caleb said, "You're not family."
He was wrong. I am family because I built it, nurtured it, and carried it.
Even if they turned away, the truth doesn't vanish with their blindness.
Family is not who inherits your house. Family is who inherits your heart.
On a warm Sunday morning, Chloe and I walked to church. The sun was kind, and the air carried the smell of blooming roses.
As we sat in the pews, surrounded by neighbors who greeted me with genuine smiles, I realized something profound.
For years, I had been afraid of being erased. Afraid that I would die a ghost in my own home, a footnote in my own family story. But now, I saw the truth.
Erasure only happens if you let it.
I had written myself back into the story, not through anger, but through action. Not through noise, but through paper. And in Chloe's eyes, in her laughter in the garden we tended together, I was alive. That night, as the house settled once more, I whispered into the silence, not with bitterness, but with peace. They tried to erase me, but I am still here.
And I will always be here.
And the house, my house, exhaled, not with sorrow this time, but with something close to relief.